Are attack helicopters obsolete? Attack helicopters have a strong presence in the armed forces of world powers. But currently, in several countries, a series of events are taking place that seem to be causing attack helicopters to start disappearing. In Russia, more than 400 K-52 alligators have been produced, one of the most modern attack helicopters today. However, since the beginning of the current conflict in Ukraine, Russia has lost more than 80 of these. Victims of Ukrainian Stinger missiles, which are very effective against helicopters flying at low and medium altitude. The reduction of the K-52 helicopter fleet is really high, and this has led to us almost not seeing it in combat anymore. Even the Japanese Ministry of Defense has said that they will no longer use attack helicopters and will instead use unmanned drones. And something quite worrying for the rotary wing vehicle industry is that countries like Australia, one of the main buyers of helicopters, could do the same. Nowadays, attack helicopters are more vulnerable than ever due to guided missiles and modern anti-aircraft systems, which have been continuously refined since the 60s. Is this the end of attack helicopters? Will these stop being used forever? Today we will answer these questions, but first let's give some context about attack helicopters. The Vietnam War was a war that, due to the characteristics of the battlefield, transporting troops and logistics was a big problem. The problem of transporting soldiers was the biggest. It was dangerous and often impossible to transport troops by land due to the density of the jungles, and transporting them by plane was difficult and quite costly. Fortunately, by the time the United States entered the Vietnamese conflict, there was already a helicopter in service that would be a key piece for the American strategy in this conflict. The UH-1, the COIS, also known as UH-1-Way East, as its designation says, utility helicopter. Its intention was to transport things and to require soldiers from one point to another. Quickly, the American Army realized the great potential this excellent helicopter had. During this conflict, where literally it was the only one that had enough agility, and also the ability to evade anti-aircraft defenses and drop soldiers where needed in the fastest and safest way possible, and also with minimal operating costs. This was fantastic. Military engineers would further exploit the capabilities and good qualities of these helicopters, creating the UH-1C version, which was a version of the UH-1-Way. Armed, eliminating the cargo cabin and filling it with ammunition and weaponry. These were the first attack helicopters that the United States Army had. The armed UH. One-Way proved to be very effective, but many were shot down by the Viet Cong. At that time, they increasingly had more anti-aircraft weaponry, so a faster and less vulnerable helicopter was needed. And so the AH-1 Cobra was born. This attack helicopter was fast and was armed with rockets and a 20mm rotary cannon. It was the answer to the needs of the American Army. But in this conflict, we saw that the Cobras were destroyed en masse. More than 300 of them were derived, and not only the Cobras. In general, about 5,000 of the 12,000 helicopters that entered this conflict were derived. So the doubt we have about whether attack helicopters are really effective exists. Since these began to be used, the United States continued developing programs for the technological development of attack helicopters, motivated by the advancement of the Soviets in this area. Of course, to be on par with the Soviets at that time were using the armed Milme-17 and the Milme-25 were coming into production. The program that would later bring us the attack helicopter, 64, would begin in 72, Apache. This was focused on the destruction of Soviet armored vehicles and also on the attack of the infantry. The Apache would start to be produced more in 84, and in 89 it would have its first battle in the United States invasion of Panama. Thanks to all its night vision technology and its high-precision missiles, this proved to be really capable, despite being slower than its predecessors. But in 91 it would fall in the Soviet Union. Let's remember that the Apaches were specifically designed to defeat Soviet armored vehicles. Without an enemy as capable as the Soviet Union, these were not necessary. The United States halted expensive R&D programs for attack helicopters. However, the AH-64 Apache would shine and demonstrate its power in Operation Desert Storm, where it would destroy around 500 Iraqi armored vehicles. compared to their losses, which were only one. That's right, only one Apache was shot down. In this conflict, we can say that its effectiveness was more than irrefutable. After its resounding success, many nations around the world bought dozens of these helicopters. The Me-25s also had similar success in previous years in conflicts related to the Soviet Union. Thanks to the Apaches and the Me-25s, in the 90s, attack helicopters were booming. Suddenly, everyone wanted attack helicopters, both Soviet and American. These offered many advantages that made them better adapt to the strategic paradigms of modern armies. The attack helicopters had night vision and machine guns, and also precise missiles that were capable of targeting and knowing exactly what or who they are shooting at with unparalleled precision. Unlike bombers and artillery, this was very advantageous for urban combat, where collateral damage always had to be kept as low as possible. The Apache, after proving its worth, began to be used only to attack targets with little air protection and to provide cover for troops and armored vehicles. And during the 90s and early 2000s, it would be used against irregular armed groups in the Middle East. But its performance has been decreasing over the years. In 2008, a direct competitor would emerge for this, which would be the Russian K-52 Alligators. The K-52 are really advanced helicopters, like the Apaches, and these saw their first real conflict in the year 2022 with the Russian intervention in Ukraine, where the K-52 Alligators would be used in all their glory. But these, in the first months of conflict, kept being destroyed, so much so that today they have almost stopped being used entirely. Analyzing their performance led to several conclusions. And the fact is that attack helicopters are very vulnerable to almost any type of air defense, and of course to fixed-wing aircraft, so they are almost as vulnerable as they are effective. A soldier equipped with a Stinger missile launcher can perfectly deviate a $16 million K-52 Alligator helicopter for the modest cost of $38,000. The main problem with attack helicopters is that they are very vulnerable to anti-aircraft defenses, and since the appearance of attack helicopters, these have not stopped becoming more advanced and accessible to the world's armies. Attack helicopters had a lot of success, but in times when air defenses consisted of large-caliber machine guns and vague precision missiles, modern attack helicopters also had a lot of success in the 90s and at the beginning of the 2000s. But against armies with deficient and outdated anti-aircraft defenses. But today, are anti-aircraft defenses really economical? This has led to almost no nation creating or buying these types of helicopters for their armies. But does this mean that attack helicopters are obsolete? Not really. The takedowns of K-52 Alligator in Ukraine were caused by pure bad Russian strategy. Contrary to tanks, attack helicopters are not useful in high-intensity conflicts. In these types of conflicts, where there are multiple enemies attacking from different sources, attack helicopters are very vulnerable. They are more useful attacking isolated specific targets strategically and taking advantage of their night capabilities. This is something that the United States Army realized in the 90s. This caused the use of these helicopters to change radically from what was originally planned, shifting to a more tactical strategy. I would say that attack helicopters are not obsolete, they were just particularly misused by Russia, at least in a short period of the current conflict. Maybe the Russians overestimated the capabilities of their attack helicopters. Attack helicopters will be relegated to a secondary role, like the ones the United States has been using so far. Many countries, like Japan, are stopping their use in favor of weapons like drones, which are much cheaper. But drones do not have the armament capabilities and advantages that an attack helicopter provides. So the replacement of attack helicopters in the short term would be something impossible for me to see. But perhaps in the medium or long term, we will see these helicopters replaced by drones that really have the same capabilities. This is something that time will tell us.